I'm Natalie, 29, standing in the marble foyer of our Chicago penthouse, a silver tray in my hand as I look at the blizzard raging outside. Today is the reading of my husband's will, and I'm ready to support his family. Coffee brewed, chairs arranged. Cynthia, I made sure everything is perfect for the lawyer. I say, my voice full of warmth. My mother-in-law doesn't even look at me. She just checks her diamond watch and says to my sister-in-law, Morgan, make sure the movers are on standby. We need this place empty by 5. I freeze. Empty, I ask. Cynthia finally turns, smiling that cold, pitying smile. Oh, honey, didn't Nathan tell you? This isn't your home anymore. It's company property. And, as of this morning, I am the company. Before we find out what secrets Nathan hid to protect her, I want to know, what time is it where you are right now? And what city are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far this family reaches. The blizzard outside my Chicago condo was howling against the glass, burying Lakeshore Drive in 2 feet of white silence. It was fitting. My husband, Nathan, had been in the ground for less than 24 hours, and the world had already turned to ice. Inside, the temperature was dropping even faster. I sat at the head of the mahogany dining table, my hands folded on the polished wood to stop them from shaking. Across from me sat Cynthia, my mother-in-law, and Morgan, my sister-in-law. They weren't wearing black. Cynthia was in a cream cashmere coat that probably cost more than my first car, and Morgan was scrolling through her phone, her acrylic nails clicking against the screen like impatient claws. They hadn't come to comfort me. They had come to collect. The family lawyer, a man named Henderson, who had always looked at me like I was the hired help, cleared his throat. He didn't look me in the eye. He just read the words that Nathan had supposedly written. To my mother, Cynthia, I leave the entirety of Solaris Tech, including all intellectual property, patents, and majority stock. To my sister, Morgan, I leave the liquid assets held in the primary Chase accounts and the collection of vintage vehicles. And to my wife, Natalie. Henderson paused. The silence stretched so tight I thought it might snap. I saw a small, cruel smile tuck itself into the corner of Cynthia's mouth. To Natalie, I leave the hunting cabin in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee and the contents therein. Morgan snorted. A hunting cabin? You mean that pile of rotting logs Nathan bought as a joke 5 years ago? She didn't even look up from her phone. Henderson closed the folder. That concludes the reading. I sat there, the words washing over me. Solaris Tech was worth $25 million. The condo we were sitting in was worth $3 million. And I got a cabin in the woods that didn't even have central heating. But I didn't cry. I couldn't give them that satisfaction. Instead, I thought about the last 6 months. I thought about the nights I spent changing Nathan's IV bags, wiping the sweat from his forehead, and sleeping in a chair next to his bed because he was terrified of dying alone. Where were they then? Cynthia was in Aspen. Morgan was at Coachella. They sent flowers. I sent my life. So, this is it, I asked, my voice quiet. This is it, Cynthia said, standing up and smoothing her coat. And since this condo is technically a corporate asset of Solaris Tech, which I now own, you're currently trespassing. I looked at her. Outside, the wind rattled the window panes. It was 10 degrees below zero. You're evicting me, in a blizzard. I'm giving you 24 hours, Cynthia said, checking her diamond watch. I need to stage this place for investors by Monday. You can take your clothes, and whatever personal trinkets you brought into this marriage. But the furniture stays. The art stays. She walked to the door, her heels clicking on the marble foyer. "Oh. And Natalie, don't worry about the cabin. I'm sure it has a fireplace. You've always been so resilient." The door slammed shut. I was alone in the apartment I had shared with my husband, listening to the storm scream outside. They thought they had won. They thought they had stripped me of everything. But as I looked out at the whiteout, consuming the city, I didn't feel poor. I felt a strange, cold clarity. They wanted the empire. Fine. They could have it. I would take the logs. I stood up and went to the bedroom to pack. I had 24 hours to erase myself from their lives. And I wasn't going to waste a single second. The drive south was a 10-hour blur of gray asphalt and white knuckles. I didn't stop for food. I didn't stop to sleep. I just drove until the Chicago skyline was a memory, and the flatlands of Indiana gave way to the winding, treacherous roads of the Smoky Mountains. By the time I reached the GPS coordinates for the cabin, the blizzard had turned into a relentless, freezing rain that coated the windshield in ice. I pulled my car up the gravel driveway, the tires crunching over snow that hadn't been disturbed in years. There it was, my inheritance. It wasn't a rustic retreat or a cozy getaway. It was a punishment. The cabin was a small, dark structure made of timber that looked black with age. The front porch sagged under the weight of wet leaves, and the windows were clouded with grime, like cataracts on an old eye. Nathan had bought this place sight unseen 5 years ago, during a manic outdoorsy phase that lasted exactly 2 weeks. We had never visited. Now, I understood why. I grabbed my suitcase and trudged to the door. The key the lawyer had given me felt heavy and cold in my hand. I turned it in the lock, the mechanism grinding like gravel, and pushed. The door groaned open. The smell hit me first: stale pine, damp rot, and the unmistakable musk of rodents. I fumbled for a light switch, but when I flicked it, nothing happened. Of course, the power was cut. I used my phone flashlight to cut through the gloom. The beam illuminated a living room frozen in time. A dusty leather sofa that looked like it had been chewed on. A stone fireplace clogged with old ashes, and corners thick with cobwebs. Dead flies littered the windowsills like black confetti. I sat on the edge of the sofa, keeping my coat buttoned to my chin. My breath came out in white puffs. This was what I was worth to them. A pile of rotting wood in the middle of nowhere. I felt a surge of bitterness so sharp it tasted like copper. Why? Nathan, was this a final joke? A way to put me in my place? My phone buzzed in my pocket, the screen glowing bright in the darkness. It was an Instagram notification. Morgan. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have looked. But my thumb hovered over the notification, and I tapped it. A photo loaded. It was taken in the Chicago condo. My condo. Less than 6 hours after I had left. Morgan and Cynthia were clinking crystal champagne flutes, my wedding crystal, in front of the fireplace I had designed. They were laughing, their faces flushed with victory and expensive wine. The caption read, "Finally got the trash out. New era for Solaris Tech. Number boss moves. Number empire." I stared at the screen until the light burned my retinas. Trash. That's what I was. Disposable. Removable. I turned off the phone and threw it onto the cushion beside me. The silence of the woods pressed in against the cabin walls. Heavy and suffocating. I was alone. I had $300 in my checking account, a car low on gas, and a house that was actively decaying around me. I pulled a moth-eaten wool blanket from the back of the sofa and wrapped it around myself, shivering as the temperature continued to drop. I curled my knees to my chest. I didn't cry. Tears required energy, and I needed every ounce I had just to keep warm. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind howl through the gaps in the logs. If I was going to survive the night, I had to stop being a wife. I had to stop being a victim. I had to become something else entirely. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the world encased in a glistening shell of ice. I crawled out from under the blanket, my body stiff and aching. The cabin was even colder in the daylight. I could see my breath hanging in the air like fog. I tried to light a fire in the stone hearth, but the wood I found stacked outside was damp and refused to catch. I tried for 20 minutes, my fingers growing numb, until I threw the matches across the room in frustration. I needed to find the fuse box. I needed heat. I started searching the cabin, opening drawers and cupboards that smelled of mildew. In the kitchen, I found a few cans of soup that had expired in 2018 and a box of matches. In the bedroom, I found an old sleeping bag. Nothing useful. Nothing that explained why Nathan had kept this place. I walked back into the living room and stopped. On the far wall, hanging crookedly above a dusty bookshelf, was an antique cuckoo clock. It looked out of place among the cheap hunting decor, intricate, hand-carved wood with delicate painted flowers. It was silent. The hands were frozen at 11:11. My wedding date, November 11th. I approached it slowly. Nathan wasn't sentimental. He didn't care about dates or anniversaries. Why would he have a clock set to our wedding day in a cabin he supposedly bought as a joke? I reached up and tried to wind it, but the chains were rusted solid. Frustrated, I pulled on the small wooden door where the bird was supposed to emerge. It was stuck. I used a butter knife from the kitchen to pry it open. With a sharp crack, the wood splintered, and the door swung wide. There was no bird inside. Instead, resting on the mechanical track, was a heavy brass key and a small slip of paper. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took the key. It was old, tarnished, and cold. I unfolded the paper. It had a set of coordinates written in Nathan's jagged handwriting: 35, 6 degrees N, 83, 5 degrees W. Under the rug, I looked down. There was a moth-eaten rug in the center of the room. I shoved the coffee table aside and pulled the rug back. Beneath it, the floorboards were loose. I pried one up with the knife. There, nestled in the insulation, was a rusted floor safe. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely fit the key into the lock. I turned it. The mechanism clicked. Heavy and satisfying. I pulled the lid open. I expected money. I expected gold. I expected something that would explain why I was here. Instead, I found 3 things: a stack of cash wrapped in rubber bands, a silver USB drive, and a tablet. I counted the cash. $10,000. Enough to survive for a few months. Maybe. But it was the tablet that drew me. It was fully charged. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up, and a video file appeared. The thumbnail was Nathan's face. I pressed play. Nathan was sitting in his office at the condo, looking pale and tired. He was wearing his favorite gray sweater. "Hey, Nat," he said, his voice raspy. "If you're watching this, it means you found the clock. I knew you would. You always tried to fix things." He paused, looking away from the camera for a moment. He looked terrified. "I'm sorry. Baby, I'm so sorry. I know you're hurt. I know you think I abandoned you. But I had to. I had to let them kick you out. I had to let them take everything." Tears blurred my vision. Why? Why would he do this? "You have a good heart, Nat," Nathan continued, his eyes meeting mine through the screen. "That's why I love you. But it's also why I couldn't tell you. If you knew the truth, you would have tried to warn them. You would have tried to save my mother from herself. You would have ruined the trap. Trap. Cynthia and Morgan. They don't love us. They love what we can give them, and they've been bleeding me dry for years. But I couldn't stop them while I was alive. They would have fought me, sued me, dragged you through hell. So I had to do it this way. I had to give them exactly what they wanted. He leaned closer to the camera. The money in the safe is for you. Use it. Get to Zurich. Find Charles. He has the rest. He has the real legacy. And Nat, don't feel guilty. They chose this. I just let them sign the paperwork. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat on the floor of the freezing cabin, the tablet heavy in my lap. The tears I had been holding back finally fell. Hot and fast. He hadn't abandoned me. He had protected me. He had orchestrated his own destruction to save me from the people who had tormented us both. I looked at the USB drive in my hand. It felt light, insignificant. But according to Nathan, it was a weapon, and I was finally ready to use it. Back in Chicago, Cynthia was living her best life. Or at least, the version of it she had always believed she deserved. She had moved into the condo immediately, hiring a team of decorators to purge every trace of my existence. My art studio became a guest room. My books were replaced with vases that cost $5,000 each. She hosted dinner parties every night, showing off the view of the lake, bragging about how she had taken control of the family legacy. Morgan was just as bad. She had raided my closet before I even left the building, taking my designer bags and jewelry. She posted photos of herself driving Nathan's vintage Porsche, captioning them, "Heir to the throne." They were spending money like it was water. They leased a new office space for Solaris Tech in the Loop, hired personal assistants, and booked a month-long vacation to the Maldives. They ignored the emails from the CFO. They ignored the voicemails from the bank. Why? It wasn't just stupidity. It was something deeper. It was a complete inability to believe that the world didn't owe them everything. They looked at the assets, the cars, the condo, the company name, and they saw wealth. They didn't look at the balance sheets. They didn't look at the liabilities. Their narcissism was a shield that protected them from reality. They believed Nathan loved them, despite how they treated him. They believed he owed them the empire. So when they got it, they didn't question it. They didn't audit it. They just consumed it. I sat in the airport terminal in Zurich, waiting for Charles. I had used half the cash from the safe to buy a ticket. I was wearing the same coat I had left Chicago in. But I felt different. I felt dangerous. Charles met me at the gate, tall, precise, unreadable. Instead of a hug, he offered a firm handshake. "Mrs. Quinn," he said. "Welcome to Switzerland. We have work to do." He drove me to a secluded stone and glass estate, inside the library. I handed him the USB. He opened its spreadsheets, legal files, audio clips. "Your husband was brilliant," Charles said. "He knew his family. Solaris Tech isn't an empire, it's a corpse." He showed me the numbers: 5 years of losses, obsolete tech, expiring patents, and $40 million in personally guaranteed debt that Cynthia had inherited along with the company. "The bank calls it in 48 hours, he said. But Nathan had protected me. He had moved the real assets, patents, investments, cash to a separate entity, DL Global, $150 million. And it belonged entirely to me. "This was the plan," I whispered. "To neutralize them." Charles replied, "He knew they'd come for you." He played the audio. Nathan's weak voice. Cynthia and Morgan pressuring him, threatening to stop his treatments unless he signed over power of attorney. He recorded this 3 days before he died. Charles said, that's when he finalized DL Global and left Solaris Tech to them. By the window, Anger finally settled into ice. When is the debt due? Tomorrow morning. Chicago time. Good, I said. Let them freeze. In Chicago. During a blizzard. Deputies arrived with a court order. Cynthia and Morgan were evicted in 30 minutes. Their accounts were frozen. Their car repossessed. Standing on the sidewalk. They called me. Natalie. Help us. They took everything. You wanted the company. I said. You took the debt too. Please, we have nowhere to go. The cabin has a fireplace. I said. If you can find wood. Then I hung up. 6 months later. Spring warmed the Smoky Mountains. I had restored the old hunting cabin and built a quiet life painting. Hiking. Managing DL Global only through a board I trusted. Cynthia and Morgan had lost everything. Cynthia worked as a receptionist. Morgan lived with a boyfriend out of necessity. They blamed everyone but themselves. They still didn't understand power isn't what you hold, it's what you can walk away from. On my porch, watching the sunrise, I finally felt the peace Nathan had wanted for me. He had played the long game to protect the woman he loved. I sipped my coffee. I wasn't cold anymore.